Director of Project Development and Construction, and we wouldn't have Atlantis if it weren't for Tim and the team, a great team of folks that we work with.
So, I like to claim it was all me, but apparently that doesn't work. There's a couple of folks,
well, somebody had to lead the charge, though.
Right.
And Tim's got more than 30 years of experience in theme parks and attractions, including Universal, the Olympic Games, 2 of them under his belt with Atlanta and what was that foreign country?
Australia.
Australia, thank you. So anyway.
Yeah, she has. So you're standing in $100 million worth of investment, but it's pretty easy when you're standing under a $1.6 billion artifact. When you say, how can you spend that kind of money? It's really been a labor of love, and we take a lot of pride in the fact that NASA and we feel stronger than that the country allowed us to have this and take care of her and do what we need to do. So every time I come down here and look back up, though, I'm brought back to the early conversations that we had over 3 years ago when we started talking about how we're going to do it, how we're going to present her. And the idea was always to present her in flight, the way she naturally was. And so you see with the, there's some cool stuff that you can't see normally, and that's like the landing gear is really neat to see when it's out. But this is the way she's going to look in space, and that was the whole concept. And I'm also reminded that it wasn't that long ago that back wall didn't even exist. And last November 2nd, we rolled her into a dirt floor, and there was nothing here except the roof and 3 walls, and none of the sidewalks, and none of this existed. And she rolled in over the course of about 16-hour day and came in here that night, and her right wing, when it came in the door right here, actually didn't fit, and we knew that wasn't going to happen. But then she backed up about 20 feet and turned on the OTS, which is the Orbiter Transport System, which had 72 wheels that all work independently. She took a quick little jog to the left at about 30 degrees and then pulled right up. And darn near, just as we pulled it in, almost hit it exactly on the spot. So I've got this picture that's very near and dear to me, even though it's a bad picture and it's taken at night and it's on a cell phone on her right wing, and it comes right up and misses that by about 11 inches on the right side, so that's kind of fun. And it was real quiet. When you're working all day and there's a lot of people in here, it was a big deal. It was a real beautiful, just that day you were here, it was a beautiful day. It was just a beautiful day and everything worked. And we pulled it in, and there's about 50 of us standing around here toward the end. And we pulled in and everything stops and it got really, really quiet. And one of my favorite quotes on the whole project was one of my quotes, and I yelled out pretty loud, "I told you it would fit." Because on November 1st, this building was huge. On November 2nd, this building was tiny. I don't know how that happens, except when you roll in this big girl in here. And there was always a lot of people that would say, "Oh, it's never going to fit. Are you sure it's going to fit?" Well, you hear all that stuff. The other thing is that she's never been shown like this. Never been lifted up in the air, never had the payload bay doors open in 1G like this, never been shown at an angle. We had to do some stuff when it came to the engineering pieces that were where it wasn't going to work, early on. It's not bad, it'll work. But we couldn't suspend it from the ceiling. It's just, she's a slim trim 155,000 pounds. And when you start thinking about hanging that from the ceiling, the cost, the $100 million would have gone significantly higher. So we worked with local engineers and we worked with local vendors and subcontractors. And we brought her in and lifted her up a little, about 2.5 inches at a time till we got to 30 feet, and then we tilted her to the 43.21 degrees to the port side. Why 4321? That sounds pretty good, but and that really is part of it. But we looked at it. We went through thousands and thousands of images of how we wanted to show this and what it would look like. And as you can imagine, and one of them that captured the eye of the collective team was, what would it look like if you were staring out of the International Space Station? What does she look like when she was pulling? And that angle was about 40, 45 degrees, and so we settled on the 43 degrees, and then we lifted it up and gently dropped her into place. And the whole building was actually designed up around this, just around this piece right here. Everything else is designed around that. So how we can do it and how we can tell you how close you actually got to come in these two locations. That one's just a little closer than we thought it was going to be. I'll be honest. Yeah, a little closer than we thought. But you know, when you build something of this magnitude, you have to start thinking about that well. So I think you guys will see, and we've gotten a lot of great feedback on how well we tell the story, and that's pretty evident on how that works. But for me, getting past those technical issues, and I'm not an engineer. I'm kind of a design leader is what I do, and project leader. But getting past those technical issues and then getting past the logistics issues and then making sure operationally all that's worked, it's been really, really satisfying to get her where she is today. We had so many little, when I'm sitting down here now I remember this, there's funny little issues that we had with design, because it wasn't 2 weeks before we opened. That was a big open, really grindy looking piece of equipment right there that we actually took steel and boxed it in to make it look. We wanted it to go away. So when you stand down here, the structure and how it works and the support system in our minds went away, and all you're doing is looking at the bottom. We also wanted to be able to see the screen in terms of that never feeling that you're not in space or on flight and on mission. So we wanted to make sure you can see that from every part of it.
Talk about once you got her up and unwrapped her, opening the payload bay doors, because that was...
Well, the payload bay doors cannot be opened in 1G.
Yeah.
So that's what they said about 3 years ago. You can't do it. It happens. It would happen in the normal course of the reassembly and the reuse. Obviously, they would open the payload bay doors in the orbiter processing facility, but there was really a lot of hardware that did that, so it would open it very slowly. There was a couple of times when it was open on the pad, when there were super secret missions, and they would open those doors and they'd slide in a piece and close it back up. And there was one time, I believe it was open when it was standing upright in the VAV. But naturally, the way this worked is that the 5,000 pound doors, which are 60 feet long, and about 18 feet wide, they're not, that sounds heavy, but it really isn't for that length of span. So they get really kind of floppy and flimsy. And then they had this giant, for lack of a better term, piano hinge that holds it all on. So when you're in 0G and you hit the switch and everything unlocks, you basically engage two motors about the size of your vacuum cleaner to open those doors. Couldn't quite do that here, a little more significant. So what we did, after a lot of hand wringing and teeth gnashing, I can tell you that there was more lost sleep over opening the payload bay doors than there was anything else. And I used the phrase early on in the design. I said, well, we could use a theatrical application. And don't ever use the phrase theatrical application with a bunch of NASA engineers around. One passed out, we had to resuscitate him, and he said, I never use that phrase again, but it really is a theatrical application. We open the doors, we craned open the doors very slowly, and then, you can barely see it, but they're held up by really small, lightweight aircraft cables in the ceiling, and that really is a theatrical application. And the way you light it just right, and those cables kind of go away and you can't see it. But to get it open, so when she's sitting up there at that angle, let's see this, she's sitting up there at the angle like this, you had to open the right-hand door first and open it way past where you wanted it, and then came back and hooked it up, and then we opened the left-hand door, dropped it below where we wanted it, and lifted it back up, because there was a certain sequence. We wanted to make sure that because it's a priceless artifact, you want to make sure you don't tweak or break the piano hinges on the bottom, and so there was a lot of care taken of that. We actually created, for a one-time only deal, these C-clamps that were about this big, and they came down at an obtuse angle where this hooked onto the bottom of the door, and then we used a system for the ceiling, so it would actually open up and peel around and keep its constant pressure on it. That's what the guys with the big heads figured that out. The rest of us just, when you do a lot of this, people tend to go, okay, let's make that happen. So that's how that worked. It went flawlessly. There was one little thing when we opened the doors, they popped a little bit, and we all kind of panicked and stopped. then we just kept going. So that was fun. It's in great shape. We took thousands and thousands of pictures of it when she landed and then rolled into the OPF. Part of our conservation piece was to get over there and take a lot of pictures and we put in these things called PEMs, and they are actually humidity and temperature devices that are on. There's 9 of them throughout different parts here and there, and wirelessly report back to us what the humidity is and the temperature is inside. And I'm happy to report from the time it left the OPF to the time it got here, we stayed within the range. And when it got here, we have a especially designed system, HVAC air conditioning system that blows super cool air down on the top of it, right through the very top. These that come down through here, and then that air is distributed around and drops down because it's cold. We also recapture the air in here, take it in, and then take the water out of it. Take all the humidity out of the air with these giant dehumidifiers that actually cool down and then reheat the air to make the condensation drop out. It's kind of cool. And then we capture that water in giant big cisterns in the back and use that water to flush the toilets in the building. But it helps us get that green lead piece. And there's a significant amount of that. It's a big building. It's whatever, 90,000 square feet. I don't know cubic feet of it off the top of my head, but it's a significant size building.
Florida has no humidity.
So yeah, exactly. And every time you open the door, you don't let humidity get in. So there's a lot of pieces that are designed that way. It's a super duper high efficiency system. And you'll actually see when you drive out tonight, if you look back, there's a big vent that comes out the side of the building. And we had a kind of a cool day a couple of weeks, a cool morning, and the steam is coming out. And of course, the security car called 911 and said we were on fire. So don't worry, it's just the steam. So it's a really high-tech system. Went to the our HVAC guys here said, "Wow, this is incredible." So they're all in awe. This thing is super automated. It does everything it's supposed to do. So
And it's been working well.
it's been working really well. We have a couple little tweaky things that we have to continue to do. We are all taken aback by how much damage a 9-year-old can do to anything, and especially uncontrolled 9-year-olds. It's funny, they did some odd damage to a couple of things over here.
We needed to have 9-year-olds come in and test ahead of time.
Well, we did. We thought we did.
Yeah.
The ones we had were actually 9-year-olds and parents that cared, and not the
You did
rampaging
just let
9-year-olds.
loose in elementary school.
You should have called a local daycare and said, "Would you drop your kids off?"
So, we had some problems with the slide.
Slide,
When we first opened it, it was too fast. And, it's going down to 22-degree glide slope. It's pretty good. I don't know if you guys have ridden it, but it's pretty fast. It's a lot of fun. And we actually had to slow people down when we got to the bottom and extended the routes to the bottom of it with an extra. So that's fun. People like it.
Talk about just lifting her. It's questions.
We lifted it up off the ground on these 4 800-ton jacks, and 2.5 inches at a time. We lifted her up with the same jacks that were in the OPF to pull out the what's called the OTS, the Orbital Transport System, and it backed out. We laid her back down on her wheels, and then we attached the other ones and lifted it up. And every 2.5 inches, we didn't want to have more than about 2.5 inches of play in it, so we used big pieces of solid wood that would go in every time it went up. So it was a funny little game because there was 4 guys on each wing. It was Jenga backwards. It was backwards Jenga because you were just pulling them up and you pull one out and add another one and make it go up. And then when you got to a certain level, you pull out all the Jenga pieces and put in this giant steel piece of dunnage that was about 6 feet tall.
All right, where's the video game designer?
It was pretty
He just
neat.
decided
So
to
it went a little at a time, and then it got up to the end, and we got it down to about 15 degrees tilted, and we said, "Wow, that looks good." And we said, "Well, it looks like we're finished." At 15 degrees. Oh no, that's only about a third of the way there. So it was pretty. It was kind of hairy, but everything went to plan, and that was really a good idea. Yes, sir.
Why is this like 22 angle instead of 45?
Well, the 22 is the angle that it takes that they normally come in, which is about 7 times the angle that a normal aircraft comes in. A normal aircraft comes in at about 3 or 4 degree glide slope. The shuttle would come in at 22 because it has no engine, so it's a glider, so it has to maintain a lot of speed. And then you see that little bump at the end. And what a normal shuttle would do is he'd come down and right at the very end, he pops his nose up to slow it down a little bit more and goes from 17,500 miles an hour down to a little under 300 miles an hour to land. And you can't, if you go at 45 degrees, you go crashing right into the earth. So he starts his glide path all the way over in Australia and makes these big turns like you see at the top, and sloughs off some speed, and by the time he comes back, he's dropping out of the sky as my friend John McBride would say, like a rock with wings, and came right down, and he only had one chance. Messed up? Couldn't mess up. That's the cool part about it. You can't put the engine on and go around. That's Any other questions? What are we talking about today?
Oh, everything.
Everything.
Just out of curiosity, this seems on such a wonderful angle. Did you have to do things structurally inside of it? Because now it's...
One of the things she's built, when we started it up, the center of gravity was this left-hand column. So when she was, see that? You see the pins? Yeah. So she went up. When we put her up, these pieces, these support pieces that are going at the angle, came all the way out to the outsides of the wings, and that's how we jacked it up. And so we cut it back when we got there. But when we started the tilter, that point was the center of gravity on both sides. And then when we started the tilter very slowly, the center of gravity now moves back to the second column. So your center of gravity moved about 14 feet from one side to the other. But she's such a solid piece of equipment and was built to withstand 5 Gs at takeoff at about 260, at the most 250,000 pounds. She's actually lighter than 155 here. She's probably around 130 after you get out some of the guts out of her. So we use the existing points to mount it, and with no strain and no stress and no laterals, she's in great shape.
So who had the tougher clearance to go through, the 11 inches you had here or in Denver out in LA?
Oh, you know what? They had a lot tougher than we did, a lot tougher. You know, they were cutting down trees. We cut down 3 trees, and we moved about 120 light poles here. They did that 6 times a day. You know, it was really interesting to watch, especially since they did it before us. But you know, it didn't go as smooth out there as they would. That Toyota commercial would have you feel. And God love them. The California Science Center and Toyota have had a long relationship, and that's really helped them with all that movement. So they got a $5 million pop to get it out there, and that was great for them. But they went into a lot of places, and the wing would be so close you couldn't have people on the second floor of the building because it came over people's patios. And I saw some great images, but they also stopped. They took them a day longer than they wanted to. So, but I wouldn't want to do it. It was fun to watch, but I don't think I would want to do it. I've worked on two Olympic relays, one in Australia and one in Atlanta, and the logistics of getting moving and everything around. And I've worked on some really big. I've worked on opening ceremonies, closing ceremonies. I've opened probably 5 or 6 major attractions. But that day, November 2nd of last year, was the best overall event I've ever been involved in. From start to finish, we left at 6:01 in the morning. We got it right over. Yeah, and had that nice little bit.
So what's next? What's going to top this for you two?
I don't know what tops it for. I'll let you know here in about 2 weeks what my next big project is.
Okay.
And we'll be a little close to home. But yeah, this is something. This is a good one. I've gotten a lot of really good attaboys to myself on this. Because when you work on a project this big, you have to go through a lot of politics to get things done. And that's like the little key, little politics. Just people have a lot of different ideas, but we never would have gotten this where we are today if it wasn't for NASA and DNC and local vendors coming together to make this work. It certainly wasn't Delaware North. It certainly wasn't just NASA. It was the guys from USA, it was the guys from Bale Brothers, the guys from BRPH, who's a design team down here. It was Ivy's Construction, which is a big construction company just down the street. And it was hundreds of vendors, Nazzle out of Orlando, Electrosonics out of London and Orlando, and Card Lee, who built that incredible Hubble right out of a pop test. And Nazzle did the work on a lot of these different pieces. And so there was a company called Mousetrap out of California that did the movie with a guy named Adam Bisark, who's done all sorts of crazy stuff. I met him in a former life, and we've done some stuff before. And then a company's called United Field out of California, out of New York, and Cortina, which is out of New York. To all these different people, very creative people, all coming together to tell a really good story. So, there's a couple of guys that you should mention here too, locally. A guy named Daniel Gruenbaum, you guys may know him. He's in charge of our artifacts warehouse and our collections. He's really got an enormous brain when it comes to all things NASA and all things the order. He's responsible as a collections guy to make sure this artifact stays in pristine condition. We engaged the services of a company called CSI out of Washington, D.C., and they've come up with a really aggressive plan. Again, we took thousands of pictures, and we want to make sure that we clean it right and that we maintain it properly. We have access to the flight deck, but only for conservation. We actually built over the top of this too. We built a window washer kind of thing that actually drops all the way down to 4 inches off the blankets on the floor. That way we can go out with long vacuum cleaners and vacuum out the payload bay if we need to. It's worked really well. But all these people came together to make that happen. A company called PGAV, which you guys have seen, the design firm out of St. Louis, PGAV Destinations, and their local guy on the job here named Dave Myers did a fantastic job. So there's a lot to it. A lot to it.
Well, I have to say, having had the chance to see Discovery in May in Blue Hazy and to see the smokes, this just smells.
No.
Well, I was in Washington over the weekend, and
Did you see the cobwebs on Discovery?
I just couldn't force myself out to go out. I really couldn't. It's like I kind of want to, this is really nice.
So you guys have done a tremendous job, and every one of these shows should have a unique.
The others won't hold a candle. Never will. Can't dream of it.
I feel good about the California Science Center because I know the guy that's out there, a guy named Dennis Jenkins, who's doing some work for them on a project basis, and he's a former NASA USA engineer here. And Dennis has written 3 books on the shuttle, and so I know it's going to be right. And he's asking all the right questions, and they can generate money. Those guys, they know how to generate money. So that $200 million that they want to do to sit there up straight, it's going to be pretty incredible. We're talking with them about some other pieces too, about how we enhance that whole presentation. And I think it's kind of cool when it's all said and done. On Intrepid, they're going to have it raised up, right? So it looks like it's lifting off. This one's in flight. Ozzy's on its wheels, and then that one will be straight up.
Intrepid's not in its final spot.
Oh no, they're still going to.
Yeah. Over on Intrepid before the bubble.
Yeah, before the bubble break.
So they are.
There's a long-term piece to that. They want to ship it across and put it on the land, and hopefully they'll move it a little better.
Well, I understand how the structure has structure. So if the power goes out, the bubble doesn't deflate. So
well, that and a little hurricane doesn't help it either. I mean, they were really lucky.
I saw her at the end of October, and that storm came through.
I was happy. It's very funny. I took my family to New York last summer. Just happened to be there the day they took it off the boat. I didn't even know what was going on. I was like, oh yeah, no, it's up here. We walked up. They were lifting it up off the boat and putting it off the barge onto the boat. It's cool. Yeah. What other questions?
Anything else?
What excites you about being on the Space Coast, and what would you want to do? Build something else here if you had a chance?
Well, I think that here's a phrase that an old friend of mine used to say: "We're sitting on a ham sandwich, starving to death." We've got 144,000 acres of pristine wilderness here that we really don't take advantage of in terms of how we get people on. We've got one of the most famous beaches in the world. Cocoa Beach is one of the most famous beaches in the world. We're here, we're the center of the space universe here, and then we have one of the most aggressive ports in the world that's just right here as well. I mean, it's a port that does over 4 million passengers a year, and has access to 8 million people a year that drive right past its front door. How do we take all those assets and make them into something that's even more spectacular for this area without losing the natural, the nature of the thing? not only major in terms of nature, but the feeling for it. You know, the port's still got to make sure it started its business as a fishing port. You know, it's still got to do that. It's got great cargo. The cruise ship business is going through the roof, and we can go from being number 2 or number 3 in the world in the country to being number 1 in the country very quickly. And all that is all about leadership, and it's all about the symbiotic relationships that have come our way because of all those natural assets that we have.
So what's your feelings on them wanting to take the Space Coast name away from the Space Coast?
I have no feelings about that at all.
Oh my God, yeah.
It's politics.
Very much so. Yes, well, I was.
It's turning around, and they're going to keep the Space Coast.
They have
to. Yeah.
It's just
Before you
changing.
disappear.
Yeah, one of the things was, you guys,
I
I used to be
complain on
the
that.
general manager at Navy here in Chicago, so I got that whole political. Chicago politics. That's it's a professional sport there. So.
I think there's one more item on the agenda today.
Tim, before you disappear, on behalf of the group, we'd like to thank you for taking your time. Everybody's written a note, signed a
great.
card for you, and some of the things some of us have put together that as our own little sort of what this event's like. It's a user-created event.
Oh, great.
So, thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your support in general. People really, this is it's the whole new world, as they say, in terms of social media and how that works.
Yep.
But the important part is that people that are passionate about what they like, get out really good information, real information instead of just something that people make up. And we appreciate you guys taking the time to do the research and making sure that the message is correct.
I thought we just made it all up.
That's most of us. I have to tell you one story though, and I won't put any names. This little crawl through place up here, we were out here and we walked through it a couple of times, and one of the people came down and said, "How do I get out to the Russian park?" Good luck. That's another really positive thing too. I forgot about that. I was really happy with how that came out. So, thanks a lot for all your help.
Thanks,
Thank you very much.
everybody.
Good to see the chicken again.